In this art tutorial, we're going to go and make some of these paint pour eyes. Now these are extremely easy to make, a lot of fun, and they don't take too long to make. Here are some of the materials that you're going to need. You're going to need paint for pouring, a canvas, and maybe some wooden little rounds if you'd like to use those. Now these were actually sent to me a while back from the Plaid Company, and these ones are already pre-mixed, ready to go and roll, so you can go and use them for spinning, pouring art, or pretty much anything that you want to go and do. So let's open up this canvas. Now this canvas I got over at Five Below. You can just order these also online or find them pretty much in honestly most art stores. But if you don't want to go and use a canvas, you can always use these little wood rounds. You can just get these from the dollar store or also art stores as well. So let's get these open. Now I haven't used these before, so I didn't really know starting off how these would fully and totally work, but you do need to have a darker color, or you can use a lighter color. It really depends on what you want to do. For this one, I am using a dark blue base, going and taking my paintbrush and just spreading this out to have as the base for all of this paint to go onto. It's really important that you spread this out pretty evenly, and then you can add your next few colors. Now I'm going with a lighter blue, and I'm going to try to keep some separation between all of the colors. This one is an off yellow, almost fluorescent green. Going to put that in there as well. And then I'm using some of this pearl, almost silver. And I really like this color just because it gives an extra shine after you remove the paint. From the center, what you want to do is you want to branch out with lines that are going outwards, and I'd say put anywhere between 15 to 20 of these. And after you have these lines down, what you're going to go and do is go back and then have lines that go inwards as well. This is going to really just help when you lay this piece of paper or towel or whatever you're going to use onto the top. This is going to really help to go and get all of these different separated colors and make this look so cool. Grab all of the corners before you go and pull this up on a paper towel, napkin, or whatever you use. Pull this into the center, and then just slowly pull it up. When you're pulling it up, try to keep it in the middle, and then this is what it looks like. Before you go and have it dry, make sure to move the paint around a little if you want to, and get any paint onto the edges just so you don't have any blank spots. Now onto the next one. For these wooden palettes, I'm using just a combination of all the other colors that I didn't really want to use for the other ones. So I'm using orange, and this one I'm going to go and make almost like a lizard eye or a dragon's eye, using this off yellow, almost green again, a couple little drops of this darker blue. I don't want it to overpower all of these really bright colors, but I want it in there. Some of this pink, and I don't want this to overpower this as well too, so just a little bit, and then some white, of course. Now after all of that paint is down, it's going to be the same exact thing that you did to the other one. Take a paper towel, napkin, whatever you want to use like that, put it down, pat it a little bit, and then you're going to go and remove this. So instead of going and using the back end of a paintbrush or whatever you want to pull the paint outwards and also inwards with some lines, this one, you're just only going and putting the paint down and then pulling the napkin up. Now let's just move around the paint a little bit. And this is what all of them look like after I have poured the paint. They're not dried just yet. And on this one that is almost like a dragon's eye, you can take a toothpick and create little squiggles that are here before the paint does dry. This is just going to make it look kind of a bit more like what I would say a dragon, lizard, or pretty much any sort of reptile's eye would look like. So I'm just using this toothpick to move around some of the paint. And now I'm going to go and let it dry. So it's going to take about 3 to 5 days for it to fully dry. This is what it should look like when it is dry. The wood will dry faster than the canvas, that I did notice, and it shouldn't be tacky at all. Now at the edges, take a darker color and go around very lightly. This is going to create just kind of a bit of a shadow. You can use maybe black or a darker color that you already do have on the palette that you have that is dried. And after you go around this entire thing, then you can go and paint the edges black. You don't have to paint them, I just feel like it looks a lot better if you do end up painting it some sort of color. In the center, now you're going to create your pupil. So make sure that this is pretty round. It doesn't have to be fully and totally perfect. And after you have that painted down, go to the edges and create little tiny lines that go off. Normally the pupil, you will see tiny lines that do go off of it anyway because of the muscle of the iris. Let that dry, and let's go back over to this one that is kind of like almost a lizard's eye. So you're going to create a very rough triangle. Now you can tell that this one was actually still slightly wet in the middle, which is okay because I did let this dry a little bit longer. I just wanted to kind of get to this sooner than later. After you have that, go and create the little branches again off to the edges, And then this took about an additional day to dry after I painted the edges around this as well, just because of the way that I guess the paint was poured. Make sure in the center you do put a small amount of that white there, and at the edges I'm using some black to give it some shadow. But again, this did take about an additional day for it to dry. So on to this one. Now this one is the canvas, and this is fully and totally dried. This took 3 days for it to dry. And at the edges, since I already did have a pretty dark color, I'm just filling in some space where there was lighter color that I didn't want it to be. So after that is done, then I'm going to go and paint in the center the pupil. Now again, when you're painting the pupil, this one's going to be bigger than the wood round, so keep that in mind. It doesn't need to be fully perfect. Make sure to go and branch out some little lines from the center, just like you did for the smaller ones. Put some white into the inner portion. And now we're going to go and glaze this. So for this wooden one, instead of using resin, I'm using some triple thick. This one dries so much quicker than resin. And it's a good example of at least if you want to go and do this craft a little quicker. Now on to this eye here. When you are using resin, you want to make sure you're in a well-ventilated area, and also that you mix everything properly so it will cure, and you do want to wear gloves. I can't stress that enough because resin can be pretty bad on your skin. So after you have this mixed up, just go and pour the resin on top, and make sure to spread it out after it is poured down. I had enough resin that was off to the side. You really don't honestly need much for a very thin layer of it. But take your time spreading this out, and do make sure it gets everywhere, along with also onto the edges of the canvas, because you do want this to be nice and shiny. And you want everything, of course, protected as well. So make sure to get the edges, and now I'm putting that off to the side. Now this is the dragon's eye, pretty much the same exact thing. I'm just putting some resin onto there, except because of how small this is, I was able to use my gloves just to go and spread everything around and get a nice and thin layer on top of here. So I'm just using my gloves, spreading it on top, putting it onto the sides, and pretty much just working it in so it is covered everywhere. Depending on your resin, you might have more or less time to work with it. This one was a 30-minute work time. Now back to this eye that I used triple thick on, which took about 15 minutes for it to dry. I'm creating these little tiny lines, which you should be doing pretty much all over this, other than into the inner portion of it. And these little lines are going to make this eye look a lot more realistic. So after those are dry, I'm giving it a second coating of triple thick. Triple thick you really don't need to wear gloves with. It's not resin or anything like that. It's a bit more skin safe, of course, but I don't suggest painting your hands with it. And then this took about 15 minutes to dry. Now back to these resin pieces. These took about a day for it to fully set. And after it's set, what you can do is you can take a razor blade, go and take it onto the surface and create these little lines. These little lines are going to be great to put in some paint to, and it's just going to make it kind of look almost wispy at the ends and give it more of a realistic look in comparison to using just triple thick or something like that. What you do then is you just wipe away at the surface after you've put that down, and you can see here that when you're going across the surface with the paintbrush with paint on it, it's just going and filling these lines in very lightly, which is great. It looks really cool, it's easy to do, and when you go and cover this with your second layer of resin, which I'm not going to show in this video just because it does take a good amount of time for it to dry, then it's going to leave a more realistic look. So now what you can do is you can fill in some of the other spaces with some of these little painted lines. These are going to be, of course, thicker than the razor blade lines. And while that's drying, going back over to here, which is the dragon eye, lizard eye, or reptilian eye, whatever you'd like to call it, going and taking my paintbrush and creating these little lines as well that branch from the center. And after everything is dry and you've covered those two canvases again with another layer of resin, this is what they can look like. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, take care and have a great one.